Hello to anyone watching this. So, pretty much every day at this point we are learning something new about the Switch 2. You know, through various leaks we're finding out about a new button or magnet or button. And while that's all well and good, you know, I can pretty much take or leave whatever new features the Switch 2 is going to have. You know, as long as it turns on and has a higher storage capacity, I'll be perfectly happy with it whenever it decides to release next year. The thing that I really care about is the games that we're getting on it. Like, obviously backwards compatibility's been confirmed, which is nice because it means that there'll definitely be something for me to play on launch day. But the big rumoured launch title that's being batted around through leaked accessories and even whole console SKUs for release day is Mario Kart 9. Like, I'd be ridiculously happy if those rumours were true, and I do think that it would help the Switch 2 get off to a really good start sales-wise. It's just for some reason I'm struggling to believe it all. Like, just the entire notion of Mario Kart as a launch title just doesn't really click in my head. So today I just wanted to at least try and explain the reasons for that, and also make a prediction for a character roster for Mario Kart 9, just so that I can get my predictions in, and in a few months or maybe years we can see just how right or wrong I turned out to be, because I really enjoy that sort of ritual humiliation. But let's get back to Mario Kart as a launch title. Now, I'm not going to bore you with an extensive history of Nintendo-made launch titles. You know, all I really need to do is flash them up on screen and just try and explain why I don't think Mario Kart fits in here. Like, I'm fully aware that this is probably just an issue with my own mentality and that times do change, but it just feels like all of these games fall into one of just a few different, like, categories in terms of what they represent in the launch lineup. Like, you have the sequels with improved visuals and gameplay, like Super Mario World and New Super Mario Bros. U. You have the quirky new ideas like Luigi's Mansion and pretty much all of the NES launch titles, and you have the games that were supposed to be released on the previous console but they're so close to the next console's launch we might as well do like a dual release, which is, you know, pretty much entirely Zelda games. And while of course there are a few groundbreaking titles like Super Mario Bros, F-Zero and Super Mario 64, I think the category that a Mario Kart 9 would fall into is the party game tech demo, like your Wii Sports, Nintendo Land and technically 1-2-Switch, I think, where it's basically out of the box, fun for all the family, showcase of what the console can do. Now, obviously that's everything that a Mario Kart game should be anyway. It's just these games that are launched at the beginning of a console's life are often lacking in content. Like, this is when the developers don't know how to fully utilise the console, and just in general you get sort of smaller games and less impressive games compared to what you can get later in a console's life, you know. Obviously that trend has been sort of bucked more recently, where you can get more ports and remakes and remasters of games that are a lot bigger in scope and scale, but if this is a whole fresh new Mario Kart, I fear that that's really not going to apply here, and there is a risk that we might be back down to a 30 character roster or 32 tracks or a non-existent battle mode. Like, once again, that's probably just me being paranoid and me trying to make connections where I don't really need to anymore, but I don't know, I'm just kind of scared that this Mario Kart's not going to have had enough time in the oven, and that's not necessarily because it has to meet the deadline of the Switch 2 launch, it's just because it is a very early life game on the console. And my sense of dread isn't helped by the fact that the Booster Course Pass only wrapped up last November. Like, I think the vast majority of the work needed for the Booster Course Pass was probably finished before 2023, and obviously I don't think that Mario Kart 9 would have started development as soon as the BCP concluded. I just think that there were definitely developers who were still polishing up the Booster Course Pass throughout 2023, and if they weren't able to work on Mario Kart 9 during that time, it again just sort of feels like not everyone was able to put as much love as they possibly could into Mario Kart 9, at least in its launch version. Like, there's probably going to be plenty of DLC and crossover characters to look forward to once Mario Kart 9 releases. It's just, again, it adds to my sense of apprehension that Mario Kart 9 is going to be the next gen Mario Kart that I'm truly hoping for. But once again, I'd just like to clarify that this is all probably just me scaremongering. Like, I'm probably just seeing patterns that couldn't possibly be there at this point, and just in general, I'm still feeling kind of stung by the lineup of Mario spin-off games on the Switch that aren't even developed by the same people as Mario Kart. So yeah, there's every possible chance that it will be the best Mario Kart ever on launch. It's just, like I said, I just wanted to go through my own personal reasons, not to try and necessarily spread them, but just to sort of air them out and hopefully be called out and debunked and just sort of settled down and made excited again. But anyway, let's get to the more fun and probably more controversial part of this video, the character predictions. Now, obviously everyone has their own idea of what a Mario Kart 9 roster should look like, whether it involves chucking in RPG characters or chucking out babies and Koopalings. You know, everyone has their own interesting take. Now, as for me, while I would love to see Booster or Vivian or Connie, I just don't think they'd fit that well into Mario Kart. Like, at this point, Mario Kart is more popular than the actual Mario platforming games, it feels like. So, while I'm really not trying to sound like it's above including obscure characters from games that are far less relevant than it just doesn't feel right to include these characters that not all of the Mario Kart player base will either know or at least can understand who they are. Like, the reason that Funky Kong works so well in Mario Kart Wii is because everyone already knows Donkey Kong, so to see his cooler friend or cousin or whatever appear as well, that feels like a cool addition. To have someone that you just don't recognise and can't immediately associate with someone else in the roster, it just doesn't feel right, to me at least. And while that's obviously not going to be a problem for a good number of players, like obviously the RPGs that have come out in the last year or so have all done quite well for themselves, I'm more so just thinking about, you know, the general target audience for these games, you know, families with children who don't really care for the more obscure Mario games. They just want the big popular platformers and spin-offs. Like, I do think it would be cool if RPG characters could come in DLC packs where they can get tracks or battle maps actually related to their home game so that people can have a better understanding of them, but that just doesn't happen in base Mario Kart games, so I think it's better to avoid them personally. Like, I do think there are absolutely ways that they could make it work, but it's just not ones that I could realistically see them taking for the base game. But anyway, let's move away from philosophy and get into numbers. The amount of characters that I'm going to have in my roster is 51. With the 1 obviously being for the Miis, because I really prefer when they get their own little rows themselves. It just makes them feel more special as a customizable character, and I think 50 is in general a reasonable number to expect, at least personally, because including male Inkling and female Villager, that was the total number of characters that we got by the end of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. So I just think it's perfectly reasonable to expect that number to be recreated personally. 8 Deluxe is also just a good place to get a lot of my characters from, because excluding the Nintendo crossover characters and the metals and animals who can just be costumes with different animations and weight classes this time, I think every single other character can just head straight on into Mario Kart 9. Like, Dry Bowser and Peachette are definitely controversial to still say in their own slots, but Dry Bowser I think has been properly established as his own character at this point, especially in a lot of spin-offs, and Peachette just doesn't work as a Peach costume because she's a different form of Toadette, and she doesn't work as a Toadette costume because she's a different size class and just generally entirely different character to Toadette, so regretfully I think she can still have her own slot. And the babies as well, because they're a different size class, they're adult forms, I just don't think it makes sense for them to be costumes. Like, the metals and animals still are the same size as their originals, so even if they're different weights, I still think it works for them. While I'm on the topic of costumes, I would enjoy if every single character in this game could have at least one different look. Like, I wouldn't want them to just bring in every single costume from Tour that aren't really references to anything. I just mean your basics, like different powered up forms of characters, different coloured forms of characters like Yoshis and Shy Guys, but expanded to Koopa Troopers and Toads. Just stuff like that that makes sense as alternate looks for characters without being complete random stretches. But anyway, let's move all of these characters onto a brand new roster screen. I like to hope that I've organised them all in a fun and satisfying way. You may or may not be wondering why some characters are backed by a different colour, and that's because all of the purple backed characters I'd like to make unlockable. Now, I'm obviously not going to give each of them an individual method in this video, you know, whether it's by completing a Grand Prix or completing a row of Grand Prix with 1 star each, or completing missions in a theoretical mission mode. You know, just some way to unlock all of these characters would be nice, and I think that the 28 to 23 split that I have is a good mix. You know, you get everyone you could possibly want as soon as you open the game, I think at least. My next lot of additions are all of the characters still stuck in Mario Kart Tour. Now, as you can see, it doesn't exactly leave that much room for newcomers, but I don't know, all of these characters just feel like they really bring something, like whether it's more minion diversity or just being a unique friendly face. Like, I feel that this group adds a real sense of vibrance to this roster. And considering the fact that in Mario Kart Tour all of these characters only play the best on a select number of courses, you know, similarly to Kamek and Pauline in the Booster Course Pass, this feels like all of their first chance to be a proper newcomer in a Mario Kart game, you know, fully playable in all aspects. You may be wondering why Donkey Kong Jr. is just sort of stuck in the corner there, and that's because his slot represents all of the SNES characters in their SNES form. You know, basically as costumes for each other. You know, you can even have their costume select window be ordered in the same way as the Super Mario Kart character select screen, or something cute like that. You know, Donkey Kong Jr. just felt like the best face to represent it, since his is the only one that's not somewhere else on the roster. So we're down to the last 3 character slots, and I'm going to give the first one to Honey Queen. I know she's very few people's favourite character from Mario Kart 7, but I don't know, I always appreciated her as an incredibly oddball pick who, at least for me, was a memorable part of the Galaxy games, and I do feel like she sort of fills the same role as Poochie as a Yoshi's Island representative, or Nabbit as a New Super Mario Bros. Representative, where I feel like giving her more exposure, even if it's only every so often, sort of helps fully represent all aspects of the Mario platformer games. Or at least that's the way I'm going to justify it. My next character and first newcomer is Cranky Kong, who I just think would be a perfect round off to the Donkey Kong representation in this roster. Like, I know 10% might seem like a lot for this little sub-series at this point, but it does feel like Donkey Kong's getting more and more relevant as time goes on, whether it's the Universal theme park, or the Mario movie, or the weird insistence that we need to care about Donkey Kong Country Returns HD. It just feels like Donkey Kong's getting a real push at the moment, and, you know, Cranky Kong is the next most logical addition from that series, and, you know, I think he's really earned a slot here. And the final and most biased pick in this roster is Spike. You know, utterly perfect creature, deserves the world, let alone a slot in a Mario Kart game. And to be fair, I do think if we're giving everyone costumes, we can give him a Fire Spike costume, and that can be the wonder representation in this roster, no matter how small. You know, I am going to will a Fire Spike costume into existence one of these days. So yeah, that's the roster. Not many newcomers, but like I said, I just don't think you need that many newcomers when all of the characters that have already appeared in some form in the Mario Kart series really create a strong enough group in and of themselves. And I think similarly to Smash Ultimates, only having newcomers as DLC, or obviously bringing back the Nintendo crossover characters if they're so inclined, would be a good way to add more emphasis to these newcomers and make them feel more special. So yeah, I'd be totally happy with this exact roster, or if they want to cut off the bottom row or last column or whatever, you know, just something above bloody 30 as the base roster this time. That's all I can really ask for at this point, I think. So yeah, that's all I really wanted to go through today. Just once I started seeing all of the rumblings that Mario Kart 9 would be a launch title, you know, at first I was like, oh cool, that'd be nice, but, you know, then my mind started thinking, which is always dangerous, and I just thought more and more about what I'd like to see and how it could work out as a launch title, and I just felt compelled to make this video. So, you know, I like to hope that if you hadn't already heard that Mario Kart 9 might be a launch title, that you're excited for it now, or apprehensive for it now, or just excited to finally hear some official news about the Switch 2 at some point before March. Just, you know, I love talking about my Mario games, and if there is an entire new Mario Kart game coming out, that's ridiculously exciting, and getting to see how its roster is going to shape up is the most exciting part for me. You know, I couldn't care less what tracks we get as long as they're fun to drive on. I want to know who we get to drive on them as, and, you know, obviously what karts we get to drive in them as on whichever. But yeah, if you have any questions or concerns, do let me know. Just another reason that I've got Mario Kart on the brain right now is because they added Mario Kart 8 Deluxe to the Alamo, which is nice. Except for the fact that I really hate the choices of tracks that they made for the alarms. Like, no Booster Course Pass, no Wii U DLC, no Retros, just 7 Wii U Nitro tracks. And the only one from the Flower Cup is Twisted Mansion. Like, do you cretins really think people want to wake up to that compared to Toad Harbor? Like, be for real. But bye-bye. Have a nice day.